Throughout the ages, we have been asking questions about the meaning of life and love, about the existence of God, the path to spiritual awakening, and the way to true peace in the world. Today, we are still asking these same questions. Perhaps we've been looking for answers in the wrong places. In every generation, there are people who reach out beyond the cultural and religious boundaries of their time, and even beyond the limits of their own thoughts, searching for answers to life's deepest mysteries. We call these seekers mystics. Not always religious in traditional ways, mystics seek spiritual awareness by exploring their own intimate connection with the divine. Their journey stems from the heart, and love is its driving force. Mystics dedicate their lives to experiencing a reality that the mind cannot grasp and language cannot explain. Although they may each travel different pathways, they all share the same vision of this ultimate reality. For the first time, mystics from the world's great spiritual traditions have come together to share the unifying truth that transcends all religions. They teach us how to hear this truth from a place of inner silence. We are all mystics seeking to solve the mysteries of existence. At some point, our quest for truth turns inward to the spiritual dimension of life. It can happen as the result of a deliberate search for a deeper reality, or it may occur spontaneously, redirecting our vision from concern with the outer world to discovering the truth that we already are, that for which we are seeking.
I was at a point in my life when I was very successful with a few businesses that I started in a very short span of time. And when everything that you touch is successful, the planet doesn't go around the sun, it goes around you. The town where I lived in India is a small hill. So one afternoon I just went and sat there. My eyes were still open. Till that moment, I always knew myself as, this is me, that is somebody else. Suddenly, I did not know which is me and which is not me. What was me was all over the place. The very rock on which I was sitting, the air that I was breathing, the atmosphere around me, everything had become me. For the first time in my adult life, there were tears in my eyes, to a point where my shirt is wet. I've always been peaceful and happy, that's never been an issue for me. But this was something else. I was bursting with a completely different kind of blissfulness and ecstasy, which my body couldn't hold.
I come out of 19 years as an alcoholic and a drug addict. That obsession that had been with me for so many years that drove me to drink a fifth of alcohol every day and do a gram of cocaine every day just to get through the day, that disappeared in a heartbeat. And I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't trying to get sober, I wasn't looking to get sober, I didn't like people who were sober, I didn't associate with people who were sober, I didn't want to be one of those people. And yet it happened. And in that moment, a profound kind of transformation occurred, because up until that point, I was convinced that I was the master of my destiny. That I was making the choices, I was making the decisions, I was making it happen, I was responsible. And clearly, I hadn't done this. And yet, I was totally transformed. And in that understanding, in the seeing in the most profound way that it was the universe that was acting, and not me as an individual, there was freedom. there was peace. And it was the peace that surpasses all understanding.
And I was walking home alone at night and looked up at the stars. So that night I had sort of reached a point of despair, and I looked up at the stars and I said, Marcel, don't kid yourself. Those stars are millions of light years away. There's no connection between me and them. And then my perception changed. It just transformed. And suddenly I experienced that the stars were inside of me, that I was inside of the stars, and that we were part of a oneness. And then I experienced or understood that everything was part of that oneness. And I experienced this sense of this light that was infusing everything and flowing through everything, through this oneness that everything is. And it was this incredible power. I felt this power, which I understand now to be the power of that divine or that oneness, that eternal being. But it was a power so strong, I felt that it could heal any problem on earth, that no problem on earth was too big for this power that could heal anything.
Away, 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 the great white eagle came and said, "Come," and flew me to the highest of heavens. When I looked back, all I could see was a little dot. That was Mother Earth. And this cosmos was the magnitude of this essence of life I talk about.
I was in the Peace Corps at the time. I was teaching English in Bangkok. And I had a friend, and we were both just beginning our exploration of Buddhism. And we were just sitting in his garden one afternoon, and he was reading from a Tibetan text called the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation. And he was just reading the text, and I was sitting there. My mind happened to be very still and very concentrated. And in one of the lines refers to it as unborn. So the word unborn was, and somehow just conditions came together. And just on hearing the word unborn, it's like something happened. It was like the unborn borned. It was just a split second, but it was like a kind of a lightning bolt, right? That just totally reorganized my understanding of things.
It was rush hour, so cars were all over the place. You smelled the pollution coming from their exhaust, the noise. So I'm walking, and that's the scene for a few moments, and then, without any forethought on my part, without any effort whatsoever, totally unexpected, everything switched. Everything changed in an instant. The peace, the perfection, the unity, the light that is the basis and the underlying support for all of this came forward. And all the activity, the noise, the names, the forms, everything took on sort of almost like a wavy reality and shifted backwards. It was there, but it didn't really matter. What mattered, what was most present, was this peace, this unshakable peace. Everywhere I looked, everywhere, there was just peace, peace, and peace.
The entire universe is pervaded by me, in that eternal form of mine which is not manifest to the senses, speaks Krishna, a deity from the Hindu tradition. Even though I am not within any creature, all creatures exist within me, although they do not exist within me physically. That is my divine mystery. How can one describe the indescribable? In the mystical view of reality, the distinction between self and other disappears. Where physical and perceptual boundaries previously existed, there remains only wholeness and unity. Siddhartha Gautama, an Indian prince known as the Buddha, taught that ultimate freedom is not outside ourselves. It is not only within us, but it is our very nature. Although there are many pathways to this living truth, the ultimate reality is nothing other than life itself. It is an experience available to each of us this very moment. The practices used to move toward this mystical summit and the words used to describe it may vary. But all mystics agree that this living truth is ever present within our hearts.
There's a sense of unity with all that is, that there is a sense of union with everything, and it is the most extraordinary and exalted of human experiences.
Even though the mystic paths are living within the traditional religion, they go beyond it. They have much more of an understanding of their unity because they are addressing the human heart.
When I speak of mysticism, I mean the experience. It's always an experience. It's not just something to talk about or read about. It's an experience, and it is an experience of unity and communion, and a communion with ultimate reality.
I mean, it's a loose term, like many spiritual terms. But what it means is that dimension of our being which is transcendent, which is utterly unlimited, which is outside of time, outside of the realm of form, outside of any kind of duality. The way I would use the word would be one which leads to at least an intuition, if not a full awakening to that transcendent quality of our own being.
For me, it means a non-conceptual experience which is direct and intuitive and not mediated by reason or reflection, and which often is contrary to things that we previously believed or took for granted.
Whether we know it or not, we're always that creative source. We can't be anything else. Not only we can't be anything else, there's nothing else.
There seems to be a direct experience with something that is luminous and expansive and has no boundaries. And there seems to be some aspect of the human mind when we are able to drop our thoughts and just simply be with what is, there seems to be some kind of commonality that crosses over all traditional lines.
Once you get to the mystical level, you go beyond the differences that the different scriptures or dogmas or traditions present. You go to the underlying unity.
At that time, we don't have a discursive mind around, and we don't even have an ego around.
It is not something that you attain. It is something that you merge with. It is something that you become.
We are talking about an experience in which the I-ness of man has totally disappeared, and therefore he doesn't talk about himself or anything else but God. He doesn't see anything else but God.
So we would say in Christian mysticism that God in us is recognizing God in others.
All of the trappings, the clothing we wear, where we come from, how we speak, what language we use, it all falls away for mystics. There seems to be a universal, I would say, a universal fragrance to mysticism. So one of the ways I'm sometimes asked, what does it mean to be a mystic? Or what is a mystical teaching? The image I often use is a rose, that I can talk till I'm blue in the face for the next 100 years on what a rose smells like. And it's not going to be understood. But if I hand somebody a rose and say, smell this, and they smell it, we now have a commonality that we can speak about. And this is what the mystical experience is like.
Well, the intellectual will think of what could be a utopian society, whereas the mystic knows that paradise is within, and that we can offer paradise, we can offer the nectar of paradise, we can offer the banquet table of love to humanity, and we can all sit at that banquet table together.
Were you to bring 10 lamps in one place, each one would be different from the other in form. But when you look at their light, you cannot differentiate one from the other. Seek the meaning of the Quran and say, we make no distinction among our messengers. Were you to count 100 apples, 100 fruits, the 100 would not remain, but become one when pressed together. In matters spiritual, there are no parts, no numbers. In matters spiritual, there is no division, no individuals. Muhammad and the founders of all the great religions of the world have communicated the same universal message. Appreciate the diversity of spiritual traditions while seeing their inherent unity. This essential teaching becomes distorted by the various beliefs and ideologies that arise when the original prophets are no longer alive, and formal institutions replace their inspired thoughts and visions. Mystics recognize this difficulty and describe how the present-day teachings can sometimes become imprecise reflections of the prophet's true messages.
Today, I would say that the two biggest issues that we face are religious warfare and intolerance, and you might say the fundamentalist attitude within which most religions have, or at least some people within them have that attitude of, I am right, everybody else is wrong, this is the only way, and I will kill you or immobilize you if you don't believe this.
Obviously, a great deal of this kind of activities, including suicide bombing, they are the result of a hopeless, desperate situation. A great deal of that, of course, is just product of ignorance and prejudice. Particularly in the case of Islam, suicide is considered a capital sin because it is believed that only God gives you life and only God can take it away. Suicide bombing has no religious justification whatsoever. As far as the Quran is concerned, there is no even slight allusion to actions like that.
I think if you ask Jesus, if you ask Buddha, if you ask the great saints and sages, they're not going to tell you, go kill people. That's what I want you to do. They came in the name of love. What did Jesus say? What is the highest teaching? Love. So how can you say that's the highest teaching and then say, well, God's will is to go kill someone?
While there is no conflict among spiritual people in the world, there is a great deal of conflict between religious people in the world. And religions are, of course, meant to foster and cultivate and protect spirituality, but religions are also, in contrast to spirituality in general, religions are institutions and culturally and historically embedded and conditioned. And institutions are always self-serving. That is just the shadow side of the institution. So even within the same Christianity, we have many, many different denominations that have good reasons, you might say, for having a chip on the shoulder against one another. They have killed one another for a very long time. And this is difficult to overcome. The reason is not spiritual. On the contrary, it's exactly the opposite to spiritual.
Like Jonathan Swift in Gulliver's Travels was, his sort of wonderful representation of which end of the egg do you open. Are you a sharp, are you a pointy end opener of the hard-boiled egg, or are you a blunt end of the hard-boiled egg opener? And the two will war with each other until the end of time, because they attach to the right end to open the egg and then argue with each other forever. And he is using it as an analogy for the spiritual arguments, particularly within the Christian church.
All the fight on the planet, though it is being projected as good versus evil, please look at it carefully. It is not about good and evil. It's one man's belief versus another man's belief. That's all it is. Religious or otherwise. But your belief versus somebody else's belief is all the fight is about, always. Whether it's within the family or between two communities or between two whatever.
When you look at the teachings themselves, they're great, but when you hear it filtered through people or see how people act, they're quite different.
If you know enough about human beings, you would know human minds are given to enormous distortion. If I teach 100 people something, these 100 people will have 100 interpretations of what's been said.
More often than not, it seems to be the interpretation of the followers rather than the original prophets or enlightened beings that create that kind of, that impression of, it's the pollution in the world or the corruption of the world is the guys in the next valley, or the other tribe, or the heretics. So just destroy the evil, destroy the heretics, and then it'll be a pure world. And that usually it doesn't seem to be the awakened ones or the great prophets and teachers that said that, but more the secretaries, the historians and the commentators and the interpreters over the ages, that they've come up with that take on things, and that becomes the received knowledge. And then he says, Muhammad said, or Jesus said, or Guru Nanak said, or says in the Bhagavad Gita.
It begins with a great prophet or a great avatar, a great charismatic leader who's filled with that divine spirit. The truth just radiates, pulsates from that being. They are surrounded by a group of disciples who are not at that level. So each one interprets in their own way.
I think we can say that every religion begins with a religious or spiritual experience. And it's that experience that is the job of the leadership of any particular religion to transmit to the next generation. Now, you need some structures to do that, but the structures must not stand in the way of the experience of the founder, which can't be communicated by words or documents or structures themselves.
There's a little teaching by the writer Wei Wu Wei, who wrote some wonderful books. And he has these little aphorisms. And he said, "What are most people doing? Worshipping the teapot instead of drinking the tea."
Hillel, a Jewish mystic who lived 70 years before the birth of Christ, was approached by a religious skeptic who challenged him to teach the entire Torah while standing on one foot. Hillel replied, "What is hateful to you, do not do unto others. The rest is merely commentary." The condition of the world mirrors the state of human consciousness. When we directly realize the interconnectedness of all life, hatred and all forms of aggression will cease. Peace in the world will become a reality when individuals realize that we belong to each other, that there is but one human family. Peace does not come from political or external solutions. It is inner peace that leads to outer peace.
The need of the hour what everyone is clamoring for is peace. And they're looking to politicians, they're looking to people who don't have that peace within to somehow negotiate it for us, or to somehow guarantee it through treaties or win it on war fields. It's not going to happen. That peace is in fact our true nature, and the only way we're going to find peace in the world is if people find that peace within and then share it with others.
One thing is, without individual human beings being peaceful, world peace is a faraway thing.
Peace is not because, the Dow Jones is doing well, or peace is not because there's no war on earth.
In the core of everything, there is peace. That means every body, every thought, every emotion, every circumstance. We know that or experience that in the beautiful thoughts and the beautiful people and beautiful circumstances. But if we're willing to experience it also in the worst of circumstances, in those people that we consider not good, and those emotions that we consider negative, if we are willing to meet all of that, all the way in, we find peace.
So that there can be peace even when you're angry. There can be peace because it isn't dependent upon a particular physical state. There can be peace even when things are going terribly for you.
I know it was a great lesson to me after 9/11, when, as established as we were in our practice, everyone was quite distressed. And I remember seeing an interview, it was Diane Sawyer with a sister-in-law of bin Laden. And Diane Sawyer asked the sister-in-law, "Do you hate him? Do you hate him for what he has done?" And she responded, "I don't hate him. He hates, and look what that has led to."
One has to know what peace is first in order to wish that for the world, much less to attain that.
And it's not a philosophical process. It is a process of seeing, a process of looking, a process of being present with what is actually here. Then the peace emanates from within.
I'm inclined to think that peace in the world was most likely to come from an increasing perception of people in general of the oneness of the human family at the deepest level, and that divisions are really something that are made by us, not by the reality itself.
A life that is articulated within the context that looks graphically like a whole bunch of people holding hands together and walking towards a chasm, but singing, because they know that if they fall, all of them together, beauty is the only thing that can happen.
Creation is by nature both harmony and conflict. And conflict is part of the greater harmony. The role of teachers, of leaders, guides, parents, should be to guide the conflict into harmony. It's not that conflict will not appear, it will always appear. But the role of one who's been invested with authority should be toward balance and toward peace and harmony.
Right now we have, for the first time on this planet, we have the necessary resources and technology and everything possible, food and everything, so that the whole humanity can live well. Never before this possibility was there. For the first time we have it. Are we going to make it happen, or are we going to use this as a power to exploit everybody else? Just depends on who is leading the world.
We need to acknowledge the tremendous impact of people in the leadership roles and choose people wonderful leadership roles who have the capacity and the understanding and the wisdom and the compassion to lead in a way that will bring about more peace in the world.
If a few key leaders, if just 25 people on this planet, the top leaders in the world, 25 people, if we transform them even 10% in their minds and hearts, I think the wars can just stop. Just 25 people.
I know that we want enlightened leaders, but I don't think we can wait for enlightened leaders. That we as ordinary people can take responsibility for finding where we are at war and being willing to stop that war and recognize the capacity for peace.
War is simply an expression of human friction. That expression can vary, and it doesn't have to be all-out warfare. We can have many constructive expressions of human conflicts with one another.
War is more of a statement of absence than the statement of presence. Absence of care, absence of love, absence of community, absence of a sense of family and village. And war is a human misguided initiative to state rather aggressively what is needed, what humans want more than anything else, to be in love.
One of the great keys, I would say, to creating peace in the world is again gratitude. If we are grateful to one another for the contributions that each one makes to the world, we will have a completely different attitude to the others. If we are grateful to other people, for instance, other nations, other cultures, we will have a completely different attitude. We will not be tempted to make war on them. We will not even have time to make war on them because we'll be so busy cultivating that bond that we have with one another.
There's no Chinese anger, and there's no American greed, and there's no Indian love. Right? These are universal qualities of mind, and they work in the same way in all people. And so freeing, and the nature of awareness, the nature of consciousness, that which knows different experience, is the same in all people.
What I see is that aggression and hatred and fear are not of the nature of that primordial ground. It's not of the nature of our essential nature. It is not part of the perfection. However, it's ignorance of the perfection, not being aware of the ground, not being open to our spiritual nature. That fact, that disconnection, that dissociation, by itself moves our experience to the opposite of it. Instead of love, there will be hatred. Instead of peace, there will be aggression and discord.
No war is still not peace. People are going through turmoil, that's still not peace. If you want consistently to be peaceful and joyful, you have to make some effort to understand, to know how to operate this machine. This is the most complex machine on the planet, your body and your mind.
Meanwhile, we don't take it easy and relax, waiting until we attain enlightenment to be peaceful. We try to live peacefully because when we cultivate anything very regularly, again and again and again, that is what is going to be perfect.
Once in a while you get a marvelous experience of the unity of the human race. For instance, when they went to the moon and they had this exciting countdown as this spacecraft descended to the surface of the moon.
Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed.
When he put his foot on the moon, everybody put their foot on the moon. I think there was an intuition there that somehow man had moved out of his cradle on the Earth and was entering into the space world, and that it was doing so with a very holistic attitude. And they saw this gorgeous blue and white ball in the middle of a black velvet background, utterly helpless. They realized that it's insane to fight over the real estate of this fragile little ball in the midst of nowhere. I mean, they have to work together to make it work.
The most effective way is to deal with one person at a time.
One person's consciousness, first of all, affects the other people in the room. So that may just be one other person.
And that person will influence another person, and that person will influence another person.
One person can change 2 person is good. Then 2 person can change another 2 person, become 4. And 4 person can change 8 person.
You keep influencing 10 people in your life, and these 10 will produce 100 people, this 100 will produce 1,000 people. Like that, it will spread very gradually, naturally. But the deep, real thing grows very slowly. It takes a root. I mean, roots must go deep down into the ground in order to make it very strong and powerful and effective.
And so in the end, world become peace. World become peace.
So from the point of view of one person who perceives deeply, sees deeply into the unconditioned nature of the human heart, that experience liberates all beings, whether they know it or not.
Mystics view all life as being interconnected and interdependent. Love is the glue that holds it all together. When Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," he meant each of us is part of an integral whole. Our neighbor is truly a part of who we are. With this realization, the division between self and other disappears. All that remains is an open heart. Compassion is love made visible. It is the heartfelt desire to relieve the suffering of all living beings. It arises naturally when we realize our inherent unity, rather than focusing on what separates us.
Rumi defines love as that essence which makes thorns into flowers, which transforms bitter vinegar into sweet wine. Love is that essence that transforms a devil into an angel. And what better definition than this for love?
One of the things that I say about love, which is so simple, is that the only way it works is by giving it. And it can never be banked.
I love to try to speak about love. But love is like the word God, or enlightenment, or self. It is corrupted by our concepts of it. And in general, we have concluded that love means when we feel good, or we're turned on in a certain way. And it's my experience that love includes all of it.
Love is indefinable, indescribable, and yet each of us, has experienced it to some degree. And it's love is an infinite ocean.
Love is like the word infinity. You can draw a little figure 8 on it, lay it on its side, and say, it's an infinite thing. Love is infinite. Well, Einstein lets us know the human mind can't grasp infinity, and the human mind can't grasp love.
Life is the source of love, and love in turn is the source of life. Without love, life will be meaningless. And without life, we don't have the appropriate means with which to allow love its full expression.
When I talk about love, I think of it as being synonymous with consciousness or acceptance or God. or source. That it isn't simply another word for the totality, for everything.
From the perspective of the Tao, love and compassion are the very essence, the very nature of mankind. And that is why when we have love, we feel such happiness and joy. And when we don't have love, we feel such longing, and we seek everywhere for love.
But in the willingness for the mind to surrender to this very deep love, Ananda, there's a possibility to love even who you can't trust, to even love your enemy, as Christ would say.
From Islamic point of view, the whole universe is the scene of interplay of divine attributes, and one of the divine attributes is love.
I think the one thing that I haven't said yet that's really important to say is that God is love.
The most powerful, uniting common thread of all would be love. It's a common thread not only to unite all the different religious paths, different faiths, but also a common thread to unite all mankind. It is literally, I think, the ultimate golden thread, the bond that unites all of us in a way that is indestructible and everlasting.
Each spiritual tradition calls the ultimate reality by a different name. To some, it is God. To others, the Tao, Buddha nature, the ground of being, and countless other names. Yet all of them point to the one truth that unites us all. All the different spiritual paths ultimately converge in the discovery that we are one with the great perfection of life. When Krishnamurti, the 20th century mystic, states that truth is a pathless land, he is describing the realization that when we experience the light of truth and enter the transcendent realm, we have moved beyond all spiritual paths. At the same time, many spiritual traditions throughout our long history have shown us the way to this timeless reality. The mystic honors each spiritual tradition and realizes its importance in creating a medium for every person to discover the ultimate truth for him or herself.
The reason I think there are so many spiritual paths is that there are so many cultures. And that's the beauty of the whole thing. You see, I think that's the key to appreciating the fact that we should approach other spiritual traditions with a spirit of openness, receptivity, and shouldn't argue them, shouldn't try to justify our own and find them wrong, because all of those traditions have arose because of circumstances, because of time, place, position, and degree. What Judaism was doing at that period of time in history was addressing the problems that needed to be addressed, and the reason it survived to this day was it works. Catholicism, it works. Protestantism, it works. Buddhism, it works.
And originally, human cultures evolved as part of a natural ecosystem, part of a natural bioregion. And the cultures that evolved, in part, evolved out of that natural harmony, a relationship between nature and human culture, human groups. So it evolved to a tremendous diversity, very much like the biodiversity that you find all over Mother Earth.
We have almost all the sacred traditions in this country now. And that's a phenomenon that has come about in the last 20, 25, 30, 40 years. It's extraordinary, you know, how the teachers have come to this land to educate people, to plant the seeds here. Because, why? Because divine destiny has some plan here, clearly. You know, otherwise it would not be happening.
So now, for the first time in history, the teachers, major teachers of the world religions and paths are able to speak to each other at a level never before possible.
I also think that no one tradition sort of understands the whole story, and that each tradition understands to some extent or another something wonderful about the divine and about spiritual life and spiritual reality, but not the whole picture. And so that as we come to understand all the different religions, we get a fuller and fuller picture of the divine reality and spiritual life.
The many birds in the air, they all have their own songs. I've yet to see a crow sing an eagle song, you know. They don't intertwine, like they don't share their songs, because that's a song that was given to them from time immemorial.
And that's why, if you are Buddhism, of course, you have path. You have enlightened path. If you think this is good for you, if you understand that, it's good for your negative emotions, good for your develop your inner wealth, loving kindness, compassion, clarity, peace, happiness, and you choose that. And that's good for you. And that's the very pure path for you. And that's why you don't have to worry about another religion. But you're not allowed to say other religion is wrong.
I know my teacher, Swami Satchidananda, used to say, it would be ridiculous if you thought about food and you went to a gathering and a group of people got up and said, pasta is the only food that we should eat. It's the only thing to satisfy hunger. Or another person got up and said, no, pudding is the way. Pudding is the only way. And then the salad people got up and said, no, salad, vegan, that's the only way to go. We would know it was ridiculous. Yet we do that exact thing in the name of religion.
The transport that we look for is what we might call spiritual path, religious affiliation, whatever it is. You know, people given any destination can, depending on what is available, choose to go there by bike, choose to walk there, choose to ride there, or fly there. For Dagara people, my people, what we choose as means of transport to get down to that essence is indeed what nature, the natural world, is offering.
I think one of the reasons there are so many different religions in the world, I think the reason was expressed by the Buddha when he said that he sees nothing more varied than the quality of people's minds.
Some of my students have been cooking during Ramadan, so the people who fast during the day shouldn't have to cook while they're hungry. These are the kind of things that only happen when we appreciate each other's calendar and say, not that the others are bad like we said in the medieval period, but to say everybody in this whole world has something to contribute.
At one of these conferences, it was held at Gethsemane Abbey in Kentucky, which is where Thomas Merton, had lived and been a hermit and wrote. And there was this big, wide hallway, in the monastery. And the Dalai Lama was walking down the hall, and he came to a statue of the Virgin Mary, and he just stopped for a moment and bowed, paid respects, and then walked on. And he didn't know, His Holiness didn't know anybody was watching. It was just a completely spontaneous, heartfelt gesture of respect, for what the Virgin Mary symbolizes. It's a beautiful moment, when we can have respect.
A sentence in the Psalm says, I'm a friend to all those who respect you, God.
Not that we should all try to put ourselves in a mishmash of religions, some kind of cocktail religion, a little bit of Judaism, a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. No, each religion has an integrity of its own.
And those of us who are called to spiritual life, it's almost like there's a responsibility to really go deep in our practice, exemplify it, and carry that torch high so that others can be inspired. Not that we preach, not that we try to impose our way, but the torch of unity, of peace, of brotherhood. I think it's the most important thing we can do today, especially today when we have the capacity to utterly destroy one another.
So how can the religions come together themselves and make peace? Because they are often the source of conflict. And for one, I would say, if they would listen more to their own mystical tradition, if they would hearken to the teachers who are alive at the time, who were teaching within their tradition, but from the point of view of, the inner sacred, the human, the temple, I think that would enlighten the religious traditions. It's interesting because Islam, in the Book of Quran, which calls itself a universal book of wisdom and love, has a wonderful model for that. In fact, it says that all the traditions are true. And it says even that you can only be a true Muslim, a true believer, if you believe them all.
Isn't it true that you have to go, that at the highest level there's only one? My response is the word universe. One direction is toward the one, that's the uni. The other one is the verse, toward diversity.
There's only one ultimate truth, and that's God. It's called by different names in different traditions. But ultimately, He's the one and only ultimate truth that He exists. You may call it Allah in Islamic tradition, God in English, or any other name in other traditions, but you are in fact talking about one single reality.
Wisdom says, I am nothing. Love says that I am everything. Between the two, my life moves. These words of Nisargadatta, a Hindu mystic, reflect the understanding necessary for a deep spiritual transformation to occur. The beginning of wisdom is to know that we do not know. Our minds are limited to those things that can be compared or contrasted. The one ultimate truth lies beyond the grasp of the mind. The beginning of love is to know that we are the other. True love knows no boundaries and illuminates everyone's heart. The beginning of peace is to find it within ourselves. It is our own inner peace that leads to peace within the world. The beginning and end of this journey exists right here and right now, for we are coming home to a place that we have never left.
If you genuinely want to seek, the most fundamental thing is that you should know that you do not know.
The minute you say, I've got it, guaranteed you've missed it.
If we don't know what realization is, we're much closer to realizing what it is.
The word seeker simply states that you have realized that you do not know, because without realizing that I do not know, you cannot seek. People have destroyed I do not know because they have not realized the immensity of I do not know. Only if you see I do not know, the possibility of knowing ever arises in your life. If you destroy I do not know, you destroy all possibilities of knowing.
There are many words in different traditions pointing to the deeper reality of the true self.
The Buddha was very clear about the words can only point to the truth, they can't embody it.
Whether you say a Buddha or a God or whatever words you use, you're only talking around it, never it.
And in Tao cultivation, we feel that it is not necessary to distinguish between these terms. All these terms are equally valid, and it doesn't matter which terms we decide to use as long as we're talking about the same thing.
If we look at history, once we name God or the Tao, then it's really not God or the Tao. It's something that's actually defined by our language and our concepts of it.
John of the Cross is talking about the same thing that Hakuin's talking about. Teresa of Avila is talking the same thing that Myoshan was talking about. You know, Walt Whitman is talking about the same thing that Basho was talking about. It's a totally different world of experience that has nothing to do with the words and ideas that describe it.
From my experiences with talking with other representatives of other spiritual traditions, it seems to me that we are all talking about the same thing. It's very difficult to say it's the same experience, because even two experiences myself are two different experiences and not the same experience. But to the extent to which we can say we have all experienced the same thing, if we see a sunrise or a waterfall, we can say we all experience the same reality as ultimate reality.
Ultimately, all these terms need to be transcended, because all of these terms are simply pointers.
There's no question, when you get beyond the words and ideas that describe things, you're in the same zone.
I think we need to let go of the idea that somehow the inner mind is affected by what's happening in the outside world, and instead embrace the idea that ultimately it is the inner landscape that becomes reflected as manifestations in the external world.
I don't think anything out there can give us meaning. And I think the mistake, the main mistake people make in life is they seek happiness, they seek meaning in external ways. And it's usually only when people have exhausted and convinced themselves that that's not going to do it, that the only place else to look is within.
It is just that the problem is not because there is something wrong, it is just that we have done nothing about it. You have invested so much amount of time to earn a living, to make outside comfortable. We fix the outside so much. What have we done to fix the inside? Nothing. Nothing has been invested, either in terms of time or resources or energies. What has humanity invested for inner well-being? Nothing. No investment, no dividend, that's all. Nothing has been done about how to be within yourself.
The main thing is to do something to prepare ourselves and not just sit there waiting for it to drop down from heaven.
I think one aspect is having a regular daily practice. Whatever particular spiritual form one is engaged in, but in a formal way, you know, whether it's sitting meditation or prayer or whatever it might be, but that it's actually done regularly, because that's a daily renewal then of the connection to our highest values. And without that, it's very easy to be caught up in the conditioning of the world.
In our tradition, what we call short time, many time practice, like meditation. And you can apply while you eating, driving, walking, watching movie, having party, taking walk. Anytime and everywhere you can apply.
Go hike in nature. You know, stand in front of a very tall tree and listen to the deep, noisy silence held together in that entity. and wonder, why can't I be like that? Stand still in the same place for we don't know how long, and find oneself growing taller and taller and taller, both upward and downward. There is something about that which defines greatness as the most obvious depths of quiet, inside of which the deepest song can be heard.
There's something so powerful about the vows of the Bodhisattva. And because we chant them every night, they become they're the sound inside you. They're the wind and the sound of the rain, and they're the crow, and they're the sound of the door being opened. And they are the door opening.
We need to encourage people to think that contemplation, while it's a gift, has already been given. Hence, it's a question of awakening to this capacity and exercising it and reducing the obstacles in ourselves, which is called purification in classic Christian terms.
If we want to understand ourselves, we have to sit down or stand up or be in some posture and observe. What is our mind doing? What are the qualities in our heart? And it's only out of that understanding that a sense of meaning begins to emerge and we actually are fulfilled in it.
Nowadays, in many ways, it's a lot more difficult because there are so many more distractions than, say, 10 centuries ago. But nonetheless, I believe reward is equally greater. It was not very difficult to be a pious person 10 centuries ago. It is quite a challenge to be a pious person today.
I think a mistake that people sometimes make, and the reason they fail in keeping that spiritual perspective throughout their daily life, is they leave their practice in the meditation room or on the hatha yoga mat, and they forget to bring it into their daily life. And it's just a matter of pure arithmetic. Let's say someone practices 2 hours a day. The rest of the day, 22 hours, they do nothing. They just let the mind run amok, let's say. It's just arithmetic. Which force, which tendency will predominate in your life? I would say amok is in the lead 11-1.
Anybody can practice. Yeah, religion, no religion, and Buddhism, no Buddhism, doesn't matter.
Your mind is not taking instructions from you because you never made an effort to understand how to operate this instrument. Any instrument that is out of control is more of a nuisance than of use.
That the spiritual teachings are for everyone, they're not just for like a kind of small collection of people who like to live an extremely quiet and simple life.
That everybody is excluded unless they become a monk or a nun. This is probably something invented by monks and nuns.
For the teachings to be useful, to be really effective, then it's important to recognize that they are essentially practical tools to work with our life. And they're accessible, they're things that we can apply throughout our days.
A thought can arise, thoughts arise, just on their own, and in the normal course we follow them. We then build on that thought into the 10,000 thoughts. But if we can recognize a thought is arising, it's not right, it's not wrong, and we have the choice in that moment, it's just a split second, just to open and let that thought disappear back to where it came from.
It takes a lot of honesty, it takes a lot of courage, to be willing to look into one's own mind, one's own heart, and take a very honest look at what is actually there. If our minds are filled with anger, and filled with hatred, and filled with jealousy, and filled with envy, and filled with fear, then that's what we're contributing to the world.
We have to train ourselves in a very systematic way, looking at our own mind and heart to see how quickly we get agitated, how quickly we get anxious, how quickly we get angry. When we see this, then we will be able to restrain, have patience, then learn to be peaceful. It doesn't happen automatically. It is not something that we were born with.
There is no path except you. There's really no other path except you, because if you want to know anything, if you want to perceive anything, if you want to experience anything, the seat of your experience and perception is within you. So there is only one path, that's you.
Just by beginning to exist ourselves, whenever you decide that took place, you are essentially in relationship to God, and hence, just by being born, one is on a spiritual journey, whether you like it or not, and because there is no other choice.
For centuries, seekers have traversed the globe in search of individuals who could provide the answers to life's mysteries. We have heard mystics from the world's great spiritual traditions directly address these questions, sharing their wisdom and their loving hearts. They encourage us to look beyond our apparent differences, to realize the one truth that unites us all, and most importantly, to manifest that truth in our daily lives.
My message for humanity is that every single person can find God within, can find happiness within, and that every person can sit down at the banquet table of love.
Refrain from that which is harmful and do your best to purify your heart, free the heart from all greed, hatred, and delusion, and awaken to that divine, pure, perfect, infinite quality that's within you.
You have to help others. Your life, in order to become your life meaningful, you do something for others. You do something for others to help people around you, to help the world as much as you can.
There is a divine reality, that we are all part of that reality, that we are, that conscious communication and communion is available to guide our lives, to guide the lives of humanity, that if we were not afraid of that, if we opened to that, if we learned to pay attention to that, we could live in harmony and peace with one another.
The most important thing that I want to tell anybody who is willing to hear it, something that will help the world, I would say, stop being fearful and try to help everybody whom you meet to be less fearful. That is the most important thing.
It's not to think about it, to talk about it, to pretend about it, but to live it.
There's something behind it all. There's something that we can all sense, a certain presence, a certain force that is behind the working of everything.
There is only one power. When we think of ourselves as limited, then we think it's our power. But there is only one source, one great energy moving through us all.
We are all children of one God. Therefore, let's get to know each other, and instead of killing each other, love each other and understand each other.
Every human being should strive to know himself, not psychologically, not intellectually, existentially, experientially. To know this piece of life absolutely is most important.
What I will say more than anything else is to be as sincere as possible, as ruthlessly sincere, heartfully sincere as possible, with oneself, to really know the truth for yourself, about your life. Look as deep in your heart as possible and find out what is really going on. Who you are, what is reality, what is life, what is the meaning of life.
Trust who you really are. This silent, open awareness. And mysteriously, that leads you to exactly where you must be to discover a deeper trust that includes what we call other.
We should appreciate each other. We should learn from each other. We should interact with each other. We should love each other, because this is the only world we've got.
Is it possible for an entire human race to open their eyes and look at each other, seeing gifts everywhere? Let's start with the gift of love. It has no market value right now. But what if it does? What will the world look like once we convert our frustration into compassion, convert our hatred into salver of love fired at one another randomly? What if we invade or entertain the spirit of invading each other with peace? What would the world look like? Changing our discourse, our language, so that the very word that we use as explosive words to support reason why we should harm each other are subdued and turned into words of love. That when you hate someone, send that someone a love poem and see how that person reacts. Is it possible for us to conceive of victory at national level? Victory of one nation against another, using the yardstick of love and compassion? If this is conceivable, then we have reached the same spirit, the same religion, and we are all heading toward the final stage of beautifying this globe that we call our village.
In the end, we are all mystics. We all share the longing to realize our divine nature. We need only to look within our hearts and listen deeply so that we too can join the conversation and speak with one voice.
God is love.
This divine reality that I've experienced is a loving reality.
Love is the meaning of the universe.
The more we can learn to live in that love, the more joyful life is.
Be as sincere as possible, as ruthlessly sincere with oneself, to really know the truth for yourself, about your life.
We must all walk the path of the Tao. And this Tao is not specific to Taoism. It is the way. It can be the way of Christianity, the way of Islam, the way of Buddhism. Whatever that is, believe in any tradition, any religious institution, but believe in something.
May all being be free. May all being wake up, discover the truth of oneself. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.